Have you ever read a book that sticks with you, but you're having trouble identifying why? That was me with the 2024 release of Dragon Rider by Taran Matharu, which I read in January, which is a big part of why I'm making this video and doing all the research needed to get this prepped. The beginning was decent, though long, and then Dragon Rider picks up to a fairly generic how to bond with your dragon. It ends with so much energy and potential, at the same time robbing us of the ending that I was picturing, or at least what I was envisioning in my brain. But the memories of the book, really the last quarter resonated in my mind to where I'm looking forward to book two, despite reading what is likely a better Dragon Rider series at the moment. Let's talk about it after the intro. Welcome to the Book Dormer. Before we get too far, we're going to start with the initial act discussion, and we're going to keep out spoilers for what happens beyond the time frame of this book's blurb. Then we're going to put up a big warning, play some music or something, that we're going to head to Spoilerville. So if you want to hear the initial thoughts and you want a non-spoiler wrap-up, you should probably exit at that point. We're going to talk about inspirations for this work, and then where it differs and where it brings in new concepts to the dragon riding genre. The world here feels smaller. It feels more like a Europe than a whole world, which perhaps, we'll see more perhaps in the sequels, but there's plenty here for a story, and we have a few cultural analogs that I'm going to start with. First off, the Romanish/Ottomanish Empire in the story. This is the Sabine Empire, speaking of terms taken straight from European history, and it feels more Roman. But the Ottoman analog, it comes from them sieging and eventually taking the major city of the world and making it their capital. That feels a lot like the Ottomans, who came into the region, right? They came in, moved into Anatolia, claimed it as their own, and eventually took Constantinople. And now we have Istanbul. Two, we have the former steppe peoples, the Hudites, who are relegated to farming. And this often happens along the borders of a large empire, where a culture is either forced to stop being steppe raiders, or they are civilized and move into a more agrarian style of their way of living. These two groups, they fell into further conflict as the Sabine Empire, like the Roman Empire and the Ottoman Empire, were largely run through slave labor. And in the Sabine Empire, they refer to these people as the fettered, which means it's more slavery than an indentured servitude. It doesn't seem like there's really a way out of it. Third, we have the Dansk Kingdom, D-A-N-S-K, which is the Norse. This is the Norse bonded with dragons, which, by the way, is terrifying. Can you imagine Norse raiders if they had dragons? Four, you have the Kadira peoples, who are unsettled steppe warriors. They kind of, I think my analog would be the Scythians, or any of the hundreds of other steppe peoples that came and went between the great empires, like between the great Persian empires and the Roman empires and the Greek. There's always these steppe peoples. This is a story of people who not only have dragons, but also a select few of them who are able to bond with them and become dragon riders. Now, before we dive into that, we need to compare to the other more famous books in the dragon riding genre. The genre kicked off with Anne McCaffrey's series, Dragon Riders of Pern, reaches back into the 1960s. Then you have The Legend of Huma by Richard A. Knack. It's from 1988. No saying it didn't age well. An obvious comparison is Cornelia Funk's 1997 novel, also called Dragon Rider, which predates this by, what do we got? 27 years? 26 years? And hers has 85,000 reviews on Goodreads. So it's definitely not like a unknown element in here. Game of Thrones, right, from George R.R. Martin, 1996, certainly has its dragons, along with all the other parts that makes it so popular. Then you have, of course, Christopher Poloni's Inheritance Cycle, e.g. Aragon from 2022. You have How to Train Your Dragon by Cressida Cowell from 2003. Mercedes Lackey has her Joust series from 2003. Maybe one of the other more recent successes in the genre, you have Naomi Novik's Temeraire series from 2006, which takes it a whole different direction. It's still dragon riding, but very different direction than most of the rest of them play. And then more recently, we have Ryan Cahill's The Bound and the Broken, which started in 2021, is still in active production. Then you also have Rebecca Yaros's The Empyrean series, e.g., Fourth Wing, also from 2023, which now has, what, 3/5 of its books released and is easily the biggest book in the genre. I was trying to remember. There was a note about how big a sales they had and how it, of book three, and how it just absolutely blew away of all the other releases for the last, gosh, what is it, a decade? So does Taran Matharu's Dragon Rider stand out from the crowd? By the end, I think yes. The hard part is explaining why. So we're going to go through the first act, which again, we're not going to go past the first act in this first discussion. And my line of demarcation is when Taran and the Dansk handmaiden, listed in the blurb as the fierce Dansk warrior, flee. This is about page 225 out of 564. That's really 39% of the book. And that's really Act 1. Now, I suppose you wanted to try like a 4-act structure. You could say all the stuff that was the complete background might have been. There's a lot of background in the front. It was about till about page 85 when something happens, and that's really where Act 1 kicks off. It's, again, this is long, and this part feels long and feels fairly generic. Now, by the act, again, this is where the act boundaries feel like they belong. If the author actually called out acts, they did not. He did not actually have acts labeled in here, so I am making those up, the boundaries myself. In fact, I think you're going to find, I'm going to call it right before the end of a chapter is where the end of Act 1 hits. Because, well, there's a reveal. And the reveal really, well, it goes beyond the blurb. So at least I'm going to cut it at that point, and then you realize there's like a little bit of Act 1 past it. All right, so what's Act 1? It's the backstory. It's the interaction between three royal families. So let's look at the players in Act 1. We have three royal families that the first act is definitely going to center around. You have the royals of the Sabine Empire. So Sabine Empire. Leonid, I called him Leonid. Leonid, the blind former emperor who has turned over control to his son. You have he's the conqueror, right? He defeated Rohan, who we'll meet in a minute, and was largely responsible for the success of the empire. Now relegated to a largely ceremonial role, Emperor Constantine Emperor Constantine is now the emperor. He was handed the title by his father, Leonid. Continuing to seek victory against the final enemy of the Hudites, a formerly nomadic people, again, who now farm. Then you have Prince Titus, the heir apparent, the one who is impatient and doesn't want to wait. This really gives me a lot of Foundation vibes. We have dawn, day, dusk, right? You have the former emperor, the emperor, and the future emperor. You have also another house. You have the royals of Qadira. You had Rohan, who is the boy's father, and he was killed in an uprising. Leonid thinks of him often, and he was the only one to ever defeat Leonid in a battle, though he eventually lost that war and then his life. You have Jai, Jai. He was 17. He's raised in the Sabine capital. He's generally decent, but through Act 1, he's got almost no agency. Instead, he spends most of his time caring for the former emperor, the man who defeated his father. You have Jai's older brothers, Arjun, who was soon to return to the rule Qadira, and then you have Samar, the middle brother. Those other two brothers, they were assigned to help on Titus's hunts and drive the beasts out. So they were like, oh, well, you're these Sabine step warriors. You can go flush the animals and send them to the nobles to hunt. You also have the nursemaid Balbir, who had helped keep the memories of home in the boy's mind. But they took the boys from her when they got too old, and now she works as a housemaid and is basically almost feted at that point, even though she wasn't one of the hostages that was sent. She's hosed now. Then you also have the uncle who sent the boys as hostages. We actually never meet him. We hear his name, but we never meet him. I'm expecting book 2. We're gonna probably meet that fella. Not a spoiler. That's just a guess. All right. Royals of the Dansk Kingdom. First off, we have King Ivar, big muscle bound. If this doesn't remind you of the father in the Disney Brave, just a big muscle, or How to Train Your Dragon, right? The big muscle bound king, gregarious but tough. Then you have Princess Erica. She's the heir apparent to the Dansk Kingdom. And lastly, we have Erica's handmaiden, Frida. So some interactions between these three different groups here. Princess Erica has been betrothed to Prince Titus. So she will raise her children to share her ethics and to be dragon riders, as only the Dansk are the ones who know how the secret to bind to dragons. And we're going to see in the magic that there's binding to different creatures. We'll talk about that in a second. Jai, he is the personal assistant / manservant / royal butt wiper for Leonid. So there's this weird relationship where he's constantly on edge. He's physically punished for whatever angers Leonid. But conversely, Leonid teaches Jai and lets him use his library. Jai serves as Leonid's eyes, describing things like early on there's a battle and Leonid, Jai teaches or calls it out and tells Leonid what's happening, and then Leonid shares his experience. So certainly Jai, he certainly has it better than the Fetid, but this is not nearly as fun as what his brothers have. Like the brothers can go date, whereas 17-year-old Jai, nope, nothing. He has an old man to take care of. The Danks show their loyalty by helping to crush the remaining Hudites, using their dragons and a strong army. And then after that, all parties move to the capital of Latium. Here we see Titus turning cruel. He's forced Jai's brothers, like to go out on a hunt, and he forces the brothers to butcher the sacred animal of their people because he thought that was funny. He's showing off and starting to bully, which is interesting because the brothers talked highly of him previous to that. Titus is also cruel to Princess Erica. He acts like a spoiled brat. He is hostile to the beautiful princess, or at least our character. All this is from the viewpoint of Jai, who has not dated. So yeah, he thinks she's really beautiful and he thinks she's really cool. And mind you, they met her when she flew in riding a dragon. And yet here she comes in flying with this dragon, and the prince is like mean to her, openly rude. Did I mention she's got a dragon? You think you might think that through a little bit. So no wonder it took long to get through Act 1. There's still a lot of backstory, and still it felt long. And we would have done with some trimming and tightening. I really think if Act 1, if we took it from 225 down to about 150, 160, we really could have gotten the same amount of backstory, or close, and made it tighter. All right, so things eventually go to hell in a handbasket when Joffrey, my bad. Titus decides to team up with the Griffin Guard, Magnus, and overthrow his father. The Griffin Guard are Griffin riders, so this kingdom has griffins, which are much smaller and weaker, but there's a lot of them. He and his allies kill both Leonid and the Emperor Constantine, along with Jai's brothers, slaughters them right in front of Jai saw it, and kills King Ivar. They wipe out the Donsk, everyone from the Donsk who came, the military. They kill or injure the dragons. They capture the princess to try to make her share the secret of how to bond with dragons, because the dowry she brought was an egg. So she brought an egg that she's going to help somebody bond with, probably a child. And instead, Titus is going to try to take it for himself. Jai escapes the assassins. There's assassins who come. They tried to hit him once earlier, but then they came for Leonid, and Jai escapes there. And he escapes, thankfully, from what he learned from Leonid and his escapades. Like he probably had a hidden lover, and so he had this secret way out that only he knew about. And so Jai takes that to get away. On his escape, he lands in this horrific scene where the Griffin Guard is shoving bodies off the edge of a plaza. So it sounds like there's a cliff up above, so this must be like one of those raised plazas like you see in Europe, and just shoving them right off the edge, including, King Ivar's dragon lands next to him. So Jay hears people approaching. He climbs inside the dragon through the room that killed it, as one does. While there, he notes the dragon's heart's been removed. And if you're reading fantasy, and if reading fantasy has taught me any one thing, it's to go, why did you include that note? First off, how would you? I'm not sure from the inside of a carcass, so I could recognize where the heart should be, but I guess he could. Then he's able to see that it's not there. Anyways, after these people came, they came to try to scavenge some stuff and get something valuable. They came, snagged what they wanted, took off. After they leave, Jai forces his way back out when something falls out of the dragon's cavity, and he trips across what he recognizes to be as a dragon egg. Yeah, he literally tripped on a dragon egg. So he takes this egg and he runs off into the woods. And soon the egg hatches and chooses him.
I choose you, Jai.
The dragon did not actually say that, but it would have helped. So this little dragon, little hatchling, now leads Jai over to where Princess Erica's dragon is, who is dying. Frida the handmaid is there. A lot of bantering starts, like she's ready to kill, and she's way tougher than Jai. So yeah, like she could definitely off him if they had a fight. And so she's there. They banter. He pleads back on the, hey, I just saw my brothers killed and everyone I know died. So, yeah, it's not great for me either here. And that is going to be your end of Act 1. That catches up with how far the blurb gets. So at the end of this act, I was a bit numb. It was a ton of backstory. And at this part, the book's a 3-star. Which is, I bought a broken binding copy of it. Usually there's an implied quality level when you do that. So the question is, how do I end up liking this book more? How does it end up being above a 4? Well, we'll see coming up, or at least we will if you keep around. But first, before we start the spoiler warning, I've got some nitpicking to do. First and foremost, Jai is 17. I don't like it when people refer to people that age as boys. You see it a lot in Western fantasy. Hey, boy, do this. It doesn't make a ton of sense. He's adult-sized. It's overused, right? And I get that there's this weird societal comparison in English where women who are much older will oftentimes be called girls, but sometimes that seems to be meant as a compliment. Where if you say, "Hey, me and the boys are going to do this," sure, compliment. Somebody goes up and goes, "Hey, boy," that is not a compliment. In no way, shape, or form. I'm not sure if "hey girl" is, but "hey boy" is definitely not. And that's annoying. And it's something that's overused in fantasy. Right. So that's just one of those nitpicks. If you went to a teen boy, someone who's like 14, 15, they're still growing. Okay, that makes sense. The guy who just killed somebody, perhaps we should move on and call him something else. Maybe young man would be a fair game. All right, that's just a nitpick in general, but it kept striking here, and I'm like, oh. Secondly, the blurb. Let's go after this. The blurb in the book. According to the blurb, Jai stole the dragon egg along with the Dansk warrior Frida. But no, the dragon was dispatched dead off a wall, and he found the egg while escaping. So the blurb lies. Like, Jai ran. He's fleeing. He's not stealing anything. And he literally stumbles over the egg. And by stealing, we mean he didn't just leave it in the junk, discarded pile of bodies. So I think this takes away from some of the promise of Jai's agency, right, in finding this egg. Because story-wise, yeah, this is fine, but that's not what the blurb says. And it's kind of weird to say how much this angers me. All right, so from this point on, spoilers will come. Let's get the spoiler warning up. And if you're going to bail out, well, thanks for having come. All right, I cut the chapter off right before the great reveal at the end of Act 1. So as soon as her dragon dies, or that dragon dies, Frida collapses. Because as Jai realizes, the dragon was actually bonded to Frida and not to the person, not to Princess Erica. Little bit of a reveal there, right? You're like, wait a minute. So now we've got a former soul bonded, because her dragon just died, and somebody who looks like they're soul bonded now because that dragon has chosen Jai. Act two is the classic, e.g., generic, grow together while traveling, meet a wizened but bitter mentor, along with a giant training montage. Makes you wonder, what music do you think they would have chosen for this training montage? Would this be like an 80s rock? Or like maybe some Gregorian chants? Like, really, where's the feel for this one? So this section, it introduces the magic system, which is tied to being soul-bound to a creature, which makes sense considering the series is named the Soul-Bound Saga. Different creatures can be soul-bound to, and this is something pretty cool. I like this. That you can, the stronger the creature that you bond to, the stronger the magic that the user is able to access. But magic still takes skill and training to learn, so you just don't immediately get it. And you have to learn even how to refill your magic pool. And even if the soulbound partner dies, the practitioner still has access to magic. Though their partner can't, well, obviously, though their partner couldn't share magic with them. Also, they don't call it mana here. It's 100% a mana pool. They have a mana pool. You just don't know it, right? Because it's not lit RPG. If this was lit RPG, 100%, we would be well aware of what that mana pool is. So we have Frida, the Dansk warrior, the handmaiden. She is far from a master of magic, but she is able to help Jai a little bit along his journey. However, she's not a good teacher, and she's very impatient. So through this section, she seems really angry with life, which, mind you, her soul partner just died. And sometimes she takes that out on poor Jai. Soon they run into trouble. They have to fight off the attackers. Then they're beset by more at an off the road inn. All the while, they're trying to avoid troops and griffin riders. They're put in danger and kind of helped by Rufus. This is the strong but guilt-ridden warrior who comes in and demands their most valuable item in exchange for teaching Jai how to recover his mana and how to get them away from this group of ruffians, which is going to be a rough fight. Jai grows in his ability. He starts to earn a little respect from Frida, a little respect. But by the end of the act, he's, by the end of it, Frida's less arrogant and less standoffish to him. She definitely, to start, was like, oh crap, I'm going with this guy and this hatchling. Speaking of the hatchling, the book's named Dragon Rider. The hatchling, who Jai names Winter, is still growing, but it's still a hatchling. It's not able to fight larger creatures. Another aside here, the dragon is Winter, whereas in the Bound and the Broken, and I'm talking about that because I actively read book one of the Bound and the Broken before Dragon Rider and now just finished book two. In Bound and the Broken, the mostly white dragon is named Valeris, which means ice. So we have winter and ice, both white to whitish dragons. This book has a blend of new ideas. It ties to the predecessors in the genre. Again, I found where Taran started writing this book during NaNoWriMo in 2013. So it's quite possible they're just both paying homage to the ideas that came before. But it was just funny that I was like, wait a minute, wasn't that the dragon's name? Let's talk romance. There's none. There's puppy love. Jai likes Frida. Remember, I mean, we heard when he met her that she was super cute. He likes that. She's also very competent. And despite being not much older, I couldn't find her actual age, but despite being not much older, she seems far more seasoned, far more elegant. Like she can switch languages way better than Jai could. And Jai, she's pretty hot. The desire does not seem replicated. Frida only has eyes to escape to Dansk and try to help out with the war effort. Because, I mean, obviously, you don't kick out the royal family and the whole travel army without intending to then launch a big invasion. And that was the whole thing. This whole marriage between the Dansk and the Sabines was to ensure peace. That was the plan. All right, this act closes out as Rufus, who, of course, right, the wizened instructor, he is stoned out of his mind, which is how he forgets his pain. He's actually poisoning himself to try to forget. And he can't help as Griffin riders poison and jump Jai and Frida, which I thought was funny. They flew over and dumped poison in the stew pot, which is kind of funny. So Frida poisoned, can't really do much. Jai didn't have as much, but still has got some effects of poison, and he's having a hard time in the fight. Jai did put up a good fight, which is oddly enough the first time we've seen him really be effective. But he loses, and they are captured. Again, fairly generic, right? It's you could take it straight from 1,000 different anything that 1,000 books, 1,000 movies, anything that follows the hero's journey. There's that, and now you go off to the wizened leader. Obi-Wan's going to take him and teach him how to fight. Of course, was done again in the same series, right? Now you get a Yoda, a better teacher, and get trained how to fight. So again, this is better than Act One, mainly because more things are happening. So it's starting to rise. I think at this point, if it ended at the same level, like if it just kept to the end, probably would have been about a 3.5 star. Going on. So moving on to Act Three, which is certainly my favorite part. Things are about to get real. So you have Jai and Frida, who were captured. And of course, your natural thought would be, oh, they're going to go back to the capital, get tortured, and going to give Titus whatever. Instead of being brought back to the capital, where they were sold to a prison camp in the Petrus Mountains, where a soulbound named Beverly and her giant wolf torment everybody. There are war prisoners from the previous Sabine Empire aggression. These prisoners are starved, abused, they're forced to build fortifications because war is coming to that region, and this fortification is at a critical pass, and it's used both to keep the steppe raiders out, but they're also going to use it as a base to attack into Jai's homeland. The cruel leaders of this prison assume that Jai is just a mute helper, so they throw him in with the other prisoners. They give him, even just to show how mean they are, they give him a piece of bread and send him into the group who is starving, so they all beat the crap out of him and take his food. Well, there he befriends a prisoner and kind of then later sticks up for this prisoners when one of the other groups, the toughs, or like the prison gang, comes to kill him. Turns out the others were right. They actually are the ones who are correct, and the one who had befriended him is actually a reporting back under false pretenses. He thinks he's going to like see his wife, who is already dead, and so he's giving them in whatever he wants and helping them out. So he's turned narc. I guess I'd be or snitch. Yeah, I guess he's definitely a stitch. And they came to give him, snitches get stitches. I guess they really were going to do it, and Jai stopped it mostly with logic or just talking, but it did seem like he was ready to throw down. He was going to lose, but he was ready to throw down because he's a stupid protag. Meanwhile, Frida is tortured, but as a strong soulborn, and she's able to escape into her mind. So whatever they do to her, whatever they ask, whatever they try to torture her with, her body's fading, but she can hide from it. So they're not going to get anything out of her. Eventually, the jailers bring Jai to try to get information out of Frida. At one point, he takes her hand because he's singing and she kind of reacts a little bit, so they let him go over to her, and she scribbles letters into his palm. After they remove him from where they were, he kind of realizes what she wrote. She wrote the word mouth. Now he was a little confused by this. Later, he's trying to figure out what it means. He realizes that she wanted him to take something from her mouth. What? He doesn't know. Because at first he's like, oh man, she wanted me to like use my mouth to do something? Confused boy. Yeah. So he never gets to spend time alone with her again. So he devises a way out of the cell that the men are locked in at night. And his solution to do this is to get himself basically the super torture kill mode. So he gets himself in trouble, and the jailers get mad at him, whack him around, bust his nose, tie him to these poles in the courtyard from which they're hanging, and it's arms above hanging, which is suffocates slowly. and they're just going to leave him there to let the others watch as kind of a warning. Yay. So he's definitely hurt, and he's given up hope at this point, right? Even though he's the one who came up with this solution, I don't know what he was thinking was going to happen, but he gets there and realizes he can't escape. But he manages to survive long enough that he makes contact with Winter, and and Jai again, he's trying to be the stupid hero. He tries to send Winter away, only but the dragon's not going to be that big of a tool. So the dragon comes to save him, yet the dragon can't free him. Big metal chains hanging around, can't get him off. So then Jai figures out what Frida had meant. By mouth, she meant she has her dragon soul stone. Suddenly, he figures this out because that's going to be full of all sorts of power and capability. So Jai's locked tight. Winter can't get him, but Winter can go retrieve the soul stone from Friday or from Frida. I called her Friday. Look, it's the name Friday without a Y. He brings it back, and Jai turns into Super Mana Power Man. Manages to break free, goes to escape because he realizes he's super hurt. He needs to heal, and while trying to leave to go heal, he meets Rufus. First, he thought he was going to be in a big fight and ready to get killed, but it turned out Rufus had found him because Rufus had been following the dragon Winter back, along with the big furry beast from their homeland, Navi or Neri, one of the two. Anyways, they get out a little bit. Jai apparently passes out because in a dream, the soul gem of the dragon gives us answers. Like Jai broke it, he got power. That's how he's able to break out in the first point. Gave him power and let him refold his mana. Jai wakes up knowing that Frida is actually Princess Erica. Now he feels ticked off and betrayed by this. Because apparently he's never read a fantasy book to know that this was the obvious place that this story was going to go. Right? You never escape with the handmaiden, you escape with the actual princess because it makes for a better story later. Rufus ends up in a fight with Magnus, and Jai goes against the jailer Beverly. Jai manages to win, manages to finally kill her giant wolf and rescue a very damaged Frida. But hero complex is active, right? So Jai returns along with Rufus, tries to free the prisoners, and with them they battle their way through the warden. By this point, Rufus, nobody knows if he's winning or losing. I think I got a little confused. I think I was wrong on that one. I think Rufus was already off fighting his nephew, the dragon or the griffin rider from the front. Just twirling mustache bad guy level. Just nothing. All these prisoners fight. Mind you, these are all people who were captured long ago and basically tortured for it. They make about 30 of them make it out alive. And not all of those are going to make it. The survivors follow the army that had moved through. So there had been an army that was moving to attack Jai's homeland. So they're following them to hide their tracks because otherwise it'd be easy to catch them. But if you're following an army that just went across the plain, right, ripped up land so you can hide your numbers. Frida, or should we now say Erica, apologizes to Jai, and Jai acts the fool. Or does he? So he doesn't necessarily accept this apology, but he leaves her with one of the other prisoners, that bully, the leader of the mini gang, who turned out to be right the whole time. And he asks the leader to take care of her. And then he rides off on his own. And she's so interested. She's like, what is going on? That's the end of her agency, apparently, because he leaves her. God damn it, Jai. You went through all this. You went through hell for that gal. And then you send her away. Yeah, that's not the way this should be done. The book is kind of bullshit right there. Although at this point, perhaps the 3.75 star, as it did get better. Right? Our protagonist actually did something protaggy, and then he went into dumb hero mode. The epilogue, small little epilogue here. So he's ridden off. Jai finds steppe tribesmen. He leads, and they come to fight, but he shouts to them in their language that they can kind of understand. And they're like, wait, how does he know this? And he pulls out his, I don't know, he's got some metal thing that Leonid had kept that shows that who he is. And he asserts his right to be the leader of the peoples. That alone pops it to a 4-star. Right. It wasn't the outcome that I wanted or expected, which was for the two rightful leaders to go together. So why is this higher? Why did it go up to 4.5 or 4.25? Why? Because for weeks I've thought about this book. It got better in my mind as I noodled over it. Jai was going to go get his kingdom. Perhaps he's doing it to prove himself worthy for Erica. Perhaps to get the forces to fight the book. I mean, there's so many potentials, and that raises the interest in my mind of this book. So it gets 4.25 stars, and I totally look forward to book 2, The Tainted Khan, which is coming out in April of 2025. I already have a pre-order in, so I get the next version of it. Note, in his AMA, Taran confirmed that this is a trilogy, so it's at least 3. But if sales are good enough, it could go beyond that. He said he scoped it, so it could go further. Now, I don't know if the sales work that well. Dragon Rider only has 3,500 ratings, has under 1,000 reviews on Goodreads. That's 4 times lower than a Blood and Fire, which is the first of the Blood or Bound in the Broken series, which didn't come out that much earlier, and it only has 1.8% of what Aragon has. So it may be sticking as a trilogy. Anyways, thanks so much for coming and hanging with me. Well, when I get the next one, I'll read it, and I guess we'll revisit. Otherwise, thanks for coming, and have yourself a lovely day.